The Nature of Predators, Part 34, by Space Paladin 15. Memory Transcription Subject, Captain Sovlin, Federation Fleet Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 6, 2136. The way the humans maneuvered through space was like a bird of prey, swooping down on its intended target. It was a graceful and motionless flight, as I watched the blue and tans of my planet come into focus. Those in the UN fleet who shrugged off their assailants fell into position and began to coordinate their next targets. Meanwhile, the dogged Arxa were forming ranks across the globe. They had no intent of relinquishing their position to a few primitives. Every sort of ammunition imaginable was ready to be lobbed at the first UN ship to stray too close. The Terrans weren't foolish enough to approach the reptilians directly, instead charting their course off to one side. Our nimble ships then hooked sharply back toward the fray with surprising maneuverability. I'm surprised the Terrans spiked into speed. It's clear they tweaked whatever vanilla building blocks they got their hands on. The furless predators at our weapons station were growling over which enemy to take on. An indicator blinked red on my data feed as the humans singled out the weakest link. I squinted at the viewport, studying their selection. The enemy ship's exterior had lost its shine, and its armor didn't look as thorough as its companions. Deploy missiles on target, and follow it up with everything our railguns got. Captain Monahan's voice pierced the air, booming and authoritative. Divert all power to shields as soon as we get a shot off. Carlos tapped me on the shoulder. Hold on. We can be in for a rough ride. Let's hope our new developments in ablative armor pay off. We banked toward our intended target, which seemed to be tracking us as well. A spray of kinetics spattered our exterior, though they did little more than superficial damage. Terran ship design diverged slightly from the Federation, which meant the Greys hadn't learned our weakness. The premise held much more intelligence about the Arxer than the other way around. Around us, UN ships were current into the fray with guns blazing. Pockets of fire littered the space in our periphery. I couldn't tell who was suffering more losses in this initial confrontation. The clash of two species of equal ferocity could only mean carnage. The bombing of the cradle ground to a halt, at least, as every ship was drawn away to address the vicious humans. The fact that a large-scale conflict with apex predators is even close is a damn miracle. It's easy to forget the Earthlings developed FTL a few months ago, I mused. Imagine how indomitable they could be, given a few hundred years of practice. A scary thought. Amidst my musings, our spacecraft pelted its opponent with a flurry of missiles. Prompt point defenses took out most of our firepower, but a handful detonated against the Arxer's armor. The rival ship struggled to regain its bearings, and was unable to return fire with its own munitions. While dazed, and possibly with navigational troubles, its defenses had shrugged off our initial assault. The dilapidated Arxer vessel peeled back toward one of its compatriots seeking backup. I could feel the roar of our engine as we gave chase at full speed. The technicians at the weapons station were racing to get the shot off. Obliterating the Greys with plasma would be a stylish finish. The enemy sensed that they were about to be nailed by the railgun, and yanked their nose skyward. The humans failed to compensate for the change of course, and our plasma stream missed the mark by a wide margin. The reptilians were emboldened after skirting our heavy blow. They knew we would have to reload. Worse, they succeeded in drawing a partner's attention, and this late joiner was the newer Arxer model. Ray shields! The Terran captain barked. Switch over to kinetics. Full speed toward the UNS Lovecraft. Our flight took on an erratic path, as the engines were pushed to their limit. The state-of-the-art fresh Arxer partner had no trouble keeping pace with us, even at our maximum speed. This was back to what they were used to, chasing an enemy that knew they were beaten. The human predators were on their heels, like everyone else. The Terrans set off bursts of kinetic bullets despite knowing full well that the Grey shields would absorb their punch. Right now we needed to buy time to find our own backup. It couldn't hurt to throw everything in our arsenal at them. My sensors told me that both Arxer ships had us target locked, and that couldn't be a good omen. On screen, the allied UNS Lovecraft moseyed toward us. The flashy blue crest on its hull demonstrated it wasn't designed for camouflage. The rectangular shape, which seemed to boast retractable doors, suggested it could be transporting smaller craft. This human ship was an unseemly clump of masts and guns. A layer of paint didn't hide that it was a predatory prowler. Some of their ships are definitely modified vanilla models, but this one screams humanity, I thought. A sensors technician glanced at the captain. The computer suggests the second Arxer hostiles railguns are charged. Evasive maneuvers are infeasible. Understood, Monahan replied, her voice icy calm. Brace for impact. My claws sank into the armrest and nerves bubbled in my chest. Why were the humans not showing more alarm? An imminent threat on their lives should at least rattle anyone with a trace of sanity. I knew that these predators could feel fear from Marcel's responses to me. Plasma snaked toward us, hungry to devour our metallic shell. The white-out blur plowed into an aft hangar. At least that's where their sensors register the impact. My arm was nearly jerked out of its socket as the force reached the bridge. The overhead light snapped off from an electrical short circuit, and baseboard lighting provided an eerie glow. The predators that were standing found themselves on the ground. A few of the unfortunate crewmates face-planted and hobbled off to mend their injuries. Alarms warned that the structural integrity was compromised. Atmosphere was venting from the rear sector, which would require repairs if we survived this battle.
UNS Rocinante, you alright?
A throaty voice crackled from the speakers. Captain Monahan surveyed the bridge. Still in one piece, Lovecraft. We could use a hand.
You heard the lady,
came the reply.
Let her rip, boys.
Our ship staggered down to avoid getting in their line of sight. The Lovecraft powered up their twin railguns on its broad hull, undeterred by the energy demands. I doubted they could command the same power as a sole armament. The humans must believe wounding an enemy in two places offset that drawback. The newfangled arcs are wisened up to the peril a bit late. By the time it slowed its pace, Terran plasma was already in transit. Two simultaneous beams blazed scars on both flanks, connecting with several key systems. The drive plume flickered out altogether, which meant our foe was out of commission. UN pilots steered the Lovecraft toward the original Arxer and deployed missiles on target. With that monstrous warship on our side, confidence was restored within the bridge. Several humans' eyes glowed with anticipation of the kill. These predators smelled blood. While the Age vessel was preoccupied with the inbound parcel, the weapon station coaxed our ship's railgun back online. A plasma beam barreled toward its target with perfect aim, magnetically accelerated by my devious partners. My instincts told me the enemy was toast before it arrived. Some intuition sensed that the momentum had shifted in our favor, and the Terrans didn't need a second chance to capitalize. Fire seared atop the enemy's armor and its integrity collapsed. The scorched metal split open from side to side, leaving the ship powerless and immobilized. With its weapons systems knocked offline, the Arxer couldn't deploy interceptors against the Lovecraft's missile barrage. The vessel exploded in an orange burst, turned into metallic residue and fragments.
That'll leave a mark,
came the gloating comment from our allies.
We're off to respond to another distress signal. Smooth sailing.
Captain Monahan offered her thanks over the comms before reviewing the damage to our vessel. It wasn't quite as extensive as I would expect. There were some nasty wounds across the ship's body, but all major systems were functional. As long as there were no issues funneling power to weapons and propulsion, we were still in the fight. The human officer straightened. Navs, bring us closer to the planet. Our structural integrity is weakened, so we're going to play a supporting role. I lowered my head for a moment, trying to cleanse some of the fear chemicals from my system. The exhilaration of killing the Arxer was lost beneath raw sensation. The burning in my chest was making it difficult to breathe, as if I was walking the line with cardiac arrest. While the predators breathing down my neck were dangerous and untamed, I was thankful they were at the helm. A human split-second decision-making under duress was clearly better than mine. Our brush with death struck more fear into my heart than any of the surrounding crewmates. "And you're considered exceptionally brave at home," I mused. "I suppose keeping it together enough to function is what we consider stoicism." Our vessel curved a winding path through the battlefield, avoiding a solo confrontation with any lurking Arxer. It was sobering to see that several dozen UN indicators had flickered out on our sensors. I hoped those measurements were erroneous, or that each Fallen had at least taken 2 enemies with them. The good news was that we had numbers. That advantage was minimized in clashes involving the Federation, when fleets often fell into disarray at the first sign of incoming fire. A bold charge like the Terrans were attempting was nigh unthinkable. We lost the psychological war before we ever thought of the physical one. "Sensors, pick out an enemy that's showing signs of critical damage." Captain Monahan nodded at the viewport, a thoughtful look on her face. "We don't want anyone to limp off and nurse their wounds." "On it," a technician answered. My eyes turned toward the cradle and homesickness burst into my chest. Beneath the tranquil blue exterior, I knew the ground was ashen and lifeless. The Arxer ships gliding above that atmosphere menaced the skies. They were locked in combat with the humans now, but if our mission failed, they would return to their bombing in a heartbeat. A dark rectangular object which burned away from the planet's glow caught my attention. There was only one Arxer ship that would flee from the heart of battle. My heart sank into my stomach and I realized which target the Terrans had to choose. It was a small mercy for the souls on board. I leapt to my paws, ignoring the bile rising in my throat. "Terminate the hostile labeled A9241 on your sensors. Please, it's on an ascent course departing from the cradle." "Hold on. Why that particular ship?" Monahan asked. I met her steely gaze. "It's a kettle ship. It cannot be allowed to leave the system. Put those Gojins out of their misery. I beg you." "There are innocent hostages on that ship?" "We don't kill civilians whenever it's possible to avoid it." "But there are fates much worse than death. Humans, please tell me you're logical enough to understand. There are children out there, and I know you care for them. You're saving hundreds of people from an existence you cannot imagine." The captain studied her own readout and waved the first officer over for a brief conference. I didn't know what she was discussing with him. It was an easy decision to me. Their hushed words gave the Greys time to get away. Maybe these predators did have stunted morality if they couldn't discern the lesser evil here. Forget the letter of the law. Monahan's head snapped up. Sovlin, how many Orcs do you expect are on board? I don't know. It's not like anyone's ever been on their ships, I growled. But, their landing parties are usually around 2 to 3 dozen per group. That seems manageable. I'll put together a breach team and we'll send a shuttle out to board them. All we need is to knock out propulsion so they're dead in the waters. The proposition was so simple, yet it almost moved me to tears. I couldn't believe these savage beasts would attempt a rescue mission mid-battle at grave peril to their own personnel. From how the UN captain reacted, it was her first instinct. The thought hadn't crossed my mind to think of these Gojis as anything but gone. As the officers began assembling a flight crew, I realized there was a foundation of genuine trust forming. The idea that humanity would want the sapient livestock for themselves had barely crossed my mind. I'd begun to believe that this conquering species would help us, just as they had with our refugees. Captain Monahan barked orders to the breach personnel, who began scouring what energy they could for the plasma railgun. There was no time to wait to back up, and most of the UN ships were preoccupied regardless. The comm station notified all nearby friendlies of the cattle vessel, so that it wouldn't be shot down while we were trying to seize it. If reinforcements arrived down the line, that would be a bonus. Sovlin, I'm going to offer my name for the boarding party. Hatred radiated from Carlos as his gaze scorched toward the viewport. I am a foot soldier after all. I'd like a crack at those grey freaks. The humans' pent-up anger seeped out as they contemplated the terrorizing foe. Hunger trickled into their stances and snarls. I could almost feel its burning hum through their veins. Wild, untapped anger spurred the primates into action, and demanded retribution for the cruelty they perceived. They're channeling their predatory energy, but they're still in control of themselves somehow, even in hunting mode. I can't imagine the intrusive thoughts it puts in their heads. Our ship raced toward the Oxer's transport, gaining on the clunky object. Cattle vessels did have external weapons, but they were more limited than their warship counterparts. However, their internal armory wouldn't be deficient by any metric. They were equipped with tools to eviscerate a city. This wasn't going to be an easy task for my human allies. You're all so noble and fearsome, I growled. Captain Monahan, let me accompany your team, please. The captain raised her eyebrows. Why would I do that? So the only Federation asset we have can be KIA? KIA? Killed in action. Oh, I won't get in your way. If you manage to free those Gojits, you'll need me to stop a stampede. They're not going to be in their right minds. You'll see why. Monahan's rosy lips twitched, and I could sense the unspoken question on her tongue. After witnessing our lack of composure during their initial landing, she wasn't sure I'd be in my right mind. It was a valid question, honestly. Charging through an enclosed space surrounded by Orcs and gunfighting would break most Gojits. The mere sight of binocular eyes pumped dread through my veins and made my spines bristle. It was a concerted effort to push that aside, but I could power through it in most cases. My fury toward the Greys had to be enough to override it. I tried to show my determination through teeth-baring, raising my claws in a threatening manner. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. Very well, don't fuck this up, and, for the love of God, don't die. Understood, ma'am, I answered. Just, if the mission fails, please take out that ship, no matter who's on board. They won't make it out of the system, not on my watch. A wave of livid excitement almost swept me off my feet, as I eyed the kettle vessel in the viewport. Few people met an Orcstar face to face and lived to tell the tale. Insertion into an enemy ship could end in complete catastrophe. Such a feat would be unheard of. My predatory companions either didn't realize or didn't care how risky their stunt was. The eager weapon station pinpointed their target, a plasma arced across the void. My nostrils twitched with anticipation. I was raring to go, same as the predators. This role was a pitiful attempt to atone for my crimes, but at least I felt certain that I was on the right side. Any way I could assist the humans, I was going to chip in.